Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of In Event Talks. My name is Deji, for those who don't know me, and I have the special honor of being your host today. Now, if you're joining us for the first time, In Event Talks is an original series by In Event, where we host discussions with industry experts as well as thought leaders across a number of fields and disciplines. One day it could be a talk on mental health and tools needed to navigate it. The next, it could be sharing expertise on HR or work tips on how to improve your efficiency. You never truly know what you're going to get. The only thing that we guarantee is that it will be informative, educational, and entertaining. Now, in today's in event talks, we're going to share on a topic that I think is very interesting and one that I have a lot of personal interest in. And that topic is employer branding. So the talk is going to be on employer branding, more than just business cards, titles, and corner offices. Now, to provide insight on this topic, we have with us today an incredible guest. His name is Michael Kamleitner, and he is the CEO at Walls.io and was a founder and is a founder at Swats.io as well. Michael, it's a pleasure to have you here with us today.
Hi, Deji. Hi, everyone at the In-Event Talks. Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for gracing us with your presence. It's been very interesting over the last couple of weeks to just speak to a bunch of different guests. And I feel like just over the time that we've done this, there's so many things that just get revealed on processes and how just people have been able to accomplish the things that they've accomplished in their career. And it's just always nice to hear little interesting anecdotes, from their lives as well. So we're very grateful to have you here with us today. And we're really looking forward to getting into it. So I think I'll just start with some personal questions about you. So you were the founder of Walls.io. I think the first thing that I want to know, just introducing it for our audience who's listening and watching, how did you create this idea and what made you focus on the social media space? And also, if you could just kind of give us a little background on what Walls.io does as well, that would be great.
Yes, of course, happy to do so, Deji. So, yes, as you already mentioned, my name is Michael. I'm founder and CEO at Walls.io. As to your question, how I came to be active in this wonderful world of social media marketing, that's of course a long story and have to try to keep short. My personal background is I'm a developer by heart. I used to build web applications, software on the web, like until 10 years ago. I found out about this new opportunity that social media platforms were giving developers. Like back in 2008, I think, Facebook first made their platform open, and that allowed small, tiny little developer shops like mine to actually build applications on top of their audiences, on top of their platforms. And being not purely technical, but also interested in communication and how information can be transferred and communicated around the world, I found it super interesting. Not to build simple little websites anymore, but to embed my web projects on these social media platforms back then. So that was the starting point, and started to do some agency work. Then was one of the first developers in the German-speaking markets to really embrace these new possibilities on Facebook and other platforms. And from there it just became even more interesting. We became a little agency business, built custom bespoke marketing applications for many customers, brands who were among the first to realize the potential of social media. So that was super exciting, always working with people who were also like very forward thinking. And out of this custom work for agencies, we basically developed the idea of Walls.io. So the idea was to use social media content or user generated content, how we call it nowadays, to basically show like that we are going beyond social media now, basically fetching and collecting content around a certain topic, around a brand, around a keyword from various social media platforms, and make that accessible to online marketers. That is what we still do, by the way. But how it really started is actually a fun story. It really started with a friend's birthday party. So we were celebrating this agency friends of mine party, and we had this idea: why not set up a display, a physical screen, a digital screen, collecting what everyone was posting about the birthday party, like what they were posting on Twitter, on Facebook. We didn't have Instagram back then, so there was not so much visual content. And so for this party, we built the first prototype actually that became Balls.io, like running this TV screen, collecting all the content. It was a great time. Everybody loved it. People were standing in front of the screen, tweeting and sharing their thoughts about the party. And basically, that was the nucleus. That was the idea that led me or led my team to create Balls.io.
Nice, nice, very interesting. Also, very interesting to know that it came from a party as well. You really never know where inspiration could come from.
Exactly. So it actually shows, and of course we only realized, or I only realized and learned it later on why to some aspect social media is so interesting, because it can connect people, and with our software it just did not connect them only online but also in the physical space. Like we acted like this
Yeah,
kind of bridge between the virtual and the physical, and
yeah.
and thinking about it, that is still true today. If you think about virtual and hybrid events, there's still this connecting element that can be social media.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. Thanks for sharing that. I think I'm just gonna move on to the next question now. I'm just piggybacking off of what you said. So I think social networks have a lot of positive things, that they've enabled us to do over the years. Just connecting globally, allowing us to promote our companies, obtain clients, so many different functions. But I think one of the things that I was curious about coming into this was more so the dark side of social media, especially in 2022. So I was going to ask you, what do you think is the least positive aspect of like the social network boom across industries and across all industries and across, I guess, the industries that you've kind of interfaced in your time?
Mhm. Honestly, that's a tough question to answer for someone like me, who basically built the most part of his career and his company on top of these platforms. So I'll be honest, it's sometimes not as easy, not that easy for me to stay objective and think about the dark sides. I will be honest with you. I mean, and I'm in this for more than 10 years now. I mean, and well, but at the core, these social media platforms, and not just social media platforms, but it extends, I think, to messenger services, for example, like Telegram or WhatsApp and so on. These are basically communication tools, and they are allowing to do communication, let's say, on steroids. So that means they massively increase the potential reach of your communication. They also, up to the point where we call it viral, even, right? I mean, that's the extreme case of increased reach on these platforms. They also massively increase the speed of communication, which is also very helpful in so many ways. So that's the positive things. Of course, I would call myself like a technologist. I usually see these platforms as tools, as neutral tools. So I'm basically very agnostic about whether it's good or bad. It's a communication channel. Obviously, the outcome of the communication can be good or bad, but it's not inherently the platform that is good or bad. So I have a sort of neutral viewpoint on that. However, that said, I think what, if at all, could be described as the dark side or the downside of these platforms is what has been caused by their by their constant struggle for growing more and more, and you could even say like their addiction to grow more, to grow their user base, to grow interaction, and how the platforms reacted. And that's basically, you might call it, the original sins of the platforms, was that they put so much emphasis on the algorithmic feeds, building like a self-fulfilling prophecy almost, that really just enforces what you are already interested in, that enforces content that encourages strong reaction. Unfortunately, that is mostly, or often, very often, negative content. So this whole algorithmic thing, which basically leads back to their business model, I think that is what you could consider a problematic, or maybe even dark side of most, or maybe even all of the social media platforms today. And we have seen that in recent years, of course, how that can play out, for example, with the US elections and stuff like that.
Yeah, yeah. I think just piggybacking off of what you said, another interesting trend that I think I've noticed with social media is that it feels like a lot of them have become the word kind of fails me, but just kind of all the same in a way. Because so I guess, I'll give you a perfect example, like with the boom of sites like TikTok, for example, it feels like everyone is sort of just kind of losing their own individuality and trying to chase that. And I guess that also just speaks to you speaking about them becoming obsessed with user growth. So whatever trend it feels like is going to bring in as much user growth, or if they see someone else doing something that is bringing them user growth, everybody just instantly flocks in that direction as well. I find that it's very interesting.
That's a very good point, and of course, also not very positive. And if you remember, and I think Facebook, Meta, Instagram, whatever you want to call it these days, is like the prime example here of really copycatting, like whatever new content format comes out, sometimes more or less successful. You are right.
Yeah,
This is also like not a very positive trend. I mean. Uh, Luckily, or I would say, like Facebook is not always successful with this strategy, but they still try. You just remember
yeah,
when the stories format popped up everywhere on Facebook, on Instagram, on WhatsApp, and so on. Yeah, you're right. That's a good point.
yeah. It's personally ruining my social media experience. For example, I don't enjoy Instagram as much as I did because now it's become like a video, just a pure video website. But moving on away from my social
I
media
can,
experience.
I can, I can feel you. I feel very similarly.
Yeah, I wish everybody would specialize more. It just feels like they're all becoming the same. But yeah, it is what it is. Um, So my next question then, just reading a bit about you and like just your bio and understanding what it is that you do, I realized that you're an angel investor, which is very incredible. Um, and I also think you just obviously have like a certain vocation for this. So why did you decide to be an angel investor is probably my first question, just going off of that. And what has been the project that has made you feel most proud, like that you've
Mm,
supported? What project have you been
mm.
most proud to support?
That's an excellent question, and also hard to answer. I would say, like, I really do enjoy building things, right? And things in my case usually means, or so far means, like creating a company, building a product. However, you can only build so many products at the same time. We all have 24-hour days, so there's only limited amount to do that. So one way to get more exposure and be more involved with more products or more companies is, of course, to find opportunities to invest in other startups, in other companies. And so that allows me to be involved in other projects. It allows me also to share what I've learned so far. Hopefully being able to help younger or other founders to learn from my mistakes, and together find out more opportunities. So it's really about being involved in other interesting projects without having to bear the responsibility to create a new company every time, but being involved on this level as an investor. So that is very fulfilling, especially because of the sharing part and learning together, and yeah, seeing how far we can bring those ideas together.
Just out of curiosity, what are some what sort of project would you say you typically gravitate towards as far as like being an angel investor? And this wasn't even a question that I planned to ask
Yeah,
initially. But I thought
no,
about
that's
it. Yeah.
fair question, good question, actually. I mean, I'll be honest. I mean, being like an angel investor, that sounds like, I don't know, I have super deep pockets and millions to spend. and, and unfortunately, or maybe not unfortunately, I don't know, for better or worse, that is not the case. So I don't have any deep pockets to invest money, which explains why the focus of the projects I'm involved in usually gravitate around the topics I'm very familiar with, and where I actually believe I can provide some value. So that means everything around online marketing, social media marketing, P2P software products. The topics I've been focusing on my previous decade or so, where I really tend to believe, yes, I can. Money aside, I can actually provide some value for the project I'm backing. So that is my sweet spot, and I think that is also why I enjoy doing that. I mean, of course, it would be interesting to be involved or invest in like completely different stuff, like consumer products or hardware. That is very tempting, and that's like maybe at some point also possible for me. But right now, I would really like to be focused on the areas where I tend to believe I can offer some expertise.
Thank you for sharing that. That was just one of those questions that kind of formulated as you were speaking. Um, So I think we've spoken a little bit about what it is that you do as far as like angel investing and like the work that you do on a day to day. Now I'm just a bit more curious about the topic that we're discussing, which is employer branding. So employer branding, can be the thing that makes or breaks a company's recruitment strategy. And if they want to attract the best work for their company, it's crucial that their employer branding is on point and resonates with the candidates they want to hire. So and just even going off of that, so it's how you position your company as an employer and how this positioning influences, I guess, the perception of businesses and what it's like to work at the company. All of these things mean a great deal. So I guess following up on that, I have a couple questions, and one of them that I want to ask is why build an employer brand on social media? So what is the importance of that as far as you're concerned and from your perspective?
Mhm. Well, I think, as you just said, at the core, employer branding, at least as I understand it, is a strategy or an approach to communicate and transport your organization's or your company's values, your approaches, or maybe the personality of your company to an audience. Usually or mostly with the goal of being being interesting for candidates in recruiting. So that's what I would say is like employer branding at its core. So why would you do that on social media? I think we can let the numbers speak. I mean, basically nowadays almost everybody is using some sort of social media platform. I don't have any exact number, but I have a feeling that it must be more than 80 or 90% of the population who are using social media channels. And more specifically, I've just I did my homework. I found some numbers. For example, I can offer you this number. 73% of the millennials found the latest position directly through a social media platform. 79% of job seekers in general, like across all generations, are using social media for their job search in the last year. So I think this is some very, very strong arguments on about why you should do or maybe even focus your employer branding efforts on social media platforms, simply because the audience will be there.
Fair enough. So it's more so about just positioning and meeting them at their points of need. Thank you very much for that.
Yes, exactly. I mean, the last time I was looking for a job, that was of course completely different. You would primarily look on job boards, etc. But nowadays, of course, job seeking works very differently. And like I said, to a good part, it will start or even happen on a social media platform.
Yeah.
LinkedIn might be the first one you think about, of course, but of course not just LinkedIn. That's also something we can discuss maybe later at a later point in this conversation. Which platforms actually could be interesting for employer branding?
Yeah. And just even moving on that, that's an interesting one. My next question then would be, what are some tips that you have for promoting like an employer, for an employer promoting their brand on social media, to attract the right type of recruitment or attention?
Well, I mean, I think there's some more tactical tips and strategies that a company might be well advised to follow, and there's maybe some more strategic approaches that we can discuss. I mean, on a tactical level, I think employer branding on social media is basically a subset or a form of social media marketing. That's at least my point of view. So a lot of tips that in general apply to social media marketing might also apply to employer branding on social media. And I think one of the first questions that you should ask, especially if you're starting to actively and strategically do employer branding on social, is of course the question: which platforms do you want to be active on? Of course, there's like this big number of platforms available these days. I don't know. For example, my product, my company, my product, the software we're building supports more than 13. So that usually means for most companies you can't be active everywhere. That just doesn't make sense. So strategies like duplicate all the content through all the channels and post everywhere the same is usually not a good advice. So the first tip really is to choose your battlefield, to choose the platforms where you want to really be active on. Of course, that has a lot to do. I can't answer that question for you without knowing more about your business. It's all about
Yeah.
your target audience. Who is your ideal? How does your ideal candidate look like? Is it someone who is using TikTok? Are they on LinkedIn the whole day? So you would have to assert that and then really choose where you want to be active on. Maybe one, two, or three platforms for starters, and then really double down on those and try to make those platforms work, not just like be everywhere at the beginning. That is something that almost never works in classical social media marketing, and I'm sure it's the same thing for doing employer branding on social.
Yeah, yeah. I've actually heard that quite a bunch. When you spread, a wide net that touches everyone, you end up not reaching anyone at all because there's no such thing as a one size
Exactly.
approach.
Exactly,
Yes.
and what we see, and unfortunately, or I mean, it is what it is, right? I mean, with our software company, we are exposed, or we have a lot of touch points with our customers, obviously, who are using our product for employer branding. So, for better or worse, we see a lot. We see a lot of good things, but of course, we see also a lot of companies who, in my opinion, are not doing it in an ideal way. And what I
Yeah.
mentioned before is this misconception, hey, we have to be active on 10 platforms, but we don't have the resources to do that, so let's just create a social media post for Facebook and then copy it to LinkedIn, and maybe even like do a one-to-one copy as a TikTok video, whatever. That's the wrong approach. Choose
Yeah.
one platform, do it right there, and hopefully you will choose the right one, which is the one where your audience actually is hanging out.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that. So my next question then, just moving on from tips for promoting your brand on social media. Um, what do companies like Starbucks, Google, uh let me just also like maybe the Starbucks, Google, IKEA, there's a bunch of them that are globally known brands. So I'll say the common thread that ties companies like this is that they do employer branding very successfully. And they stand out. They attract the best type of talent, especially with Google. Google is, you know, just acknowledged worldwide as being a company that a lot of people want to work for, and they've done that in so many ways. They even have they've gone so far as creating a movie, where they have um people. I think it was Will Ferrell and Owen Wilson as interns, and then they show a bunch of the Google practices, and it looks very cool. But yeah, so I think a bunch of these companies have done a really good job in employing and promoting their employer brand. And in your opinion, what are some of the things that have made these particular guys stand out? Or like even just the most successful employer brands that you can think of. So what are some of the things that make them such powerful employer
Yeah.
brands?
Well, I had to smile now because you reminded me of the movie. What's it called? The Interns? Was it The
I think the
Interns?
interns, yes.
Yeah, I gotta rewatch that because it's been a few years. That was a great one. I'll be honest. I don't know too much about Starbucks or IKEA and why their employer branding is so great. It is obviously great, but I would prefer to speak about Google because that is the industry I'm working in. And like I said in the beginning, I used to be a software developer myself. So I would probably, would I be living in the States? I would have been like maybe a potential candidate for them. Maybe I wasn't good enough.
Interesting.
I don't know. So I think I can. I can best relate to Google of the companies you have mentioned. Still not easy to answer that one. I think what Google they did very well, especially in the early years, is and I think they did it well before most other companies, or maybe I don't know, maybe even all, is like to really put out their mission and the reason why they're existing. And yes, nowadays you might find that a bit trivial, or you could be sarcastic about it. But this motto, putting out the motto, "Don't be evil," it worked in a very powerful way. Obviously, nowadays nobody would believe that motto anymore because some might say it's maybe not so much true. I don't want to
Yeah.
discuss. That's not the point. But the point was like like explaining the purpose of the company and why you actually want to work there. I think back then, and I think like 20 years ago almost, right? It was a pretty new concept, at least for me. A company putting out that so into the spotlight. So I think that
Yeah.
is a big part why Google is what it is today, and why it is such a still such a brand that is so aspirational for many software developers, right? That's another aspect that they somehow managed to make clear. If you're a computer scientist, if you're a software developer, it's basically as good as it gets. There's at least until a few years ago, it was like really the top you could get. There's nothing more interesting, more technologically challenging for a software developer than to work on these big projects, big issues that Google is tackling. So they did that very well, and I think although nowadays they have like much more competition, there's many other tech companies who are doing excellent employer branding these days, but I think they are still getting value out of being so early with their employer branding.
Yeah. So there was an honesty to it for you that you feel like in the initial stage that was very good for their branding. Thank you for that.
Yes,
That's actually
definitely, definitely.
because honesty, it feels like honesty is often an afterthought, but I honestly just working in PR myself, I feel like if you can afford to be honest about most things, then it's probably better to be, simply because it's more sustainable that way. So I appreciate that point very much.
That's
Um,
that's that's very much true, and it's true not just in external communication, but of course even more so. I would say internally, and once you try to be transparent and truthful and honest to the outside, there's no. You also have to be. So one goes with the other. So that's a self-enforcing thing and a positive thing, I would say.
nice, nice. Thank you. Um, so I think my next question then, and I kind of wanted to press on a bit more, and obviously if this is too on the spot, then feel free to discard because I feel like there's more questions that we can ask. But I'm wondering that in your experience and the people that you've encountered, what are some of the I guess so maybe give us a couple pieces of advice that you've given as far as like strategies for promoting your employer brand across social media. So that's one.
Mhm.
And if that's a question that you feel like you can stretch that you can answer. And then two, is there any company in particular that you feel like does their employer branding in an excellent way? So those are
Mhm.
my two.
So I would like to follow up. We did start to discuss a little bit about tactical or specific tips on doing employer branding on social media, and I mentioned like picking the right platforms as one tip. I could go on and on here. I mean, there's more things to do on a tactical level. I will come to the strategic level in a second. Like for example, building a social media content calendar, making sure that you have a good mix of content on the various platforms that addresses various target groups, various groups of candidates, and making it all like structured and planned, not just like decide 5 minutes before it's time to post. Yeah, let's do this today, and maybe tomorrow something else. Like have a plan and follow a editorial content plan really, and that content plan, of course, has to be sourced, or the fundament has to be your employer branding strategy. So be strategic in your content planning, execute on it, and of course tools can help with that. Um, there's another more strategic approach here that I would like to push and force. I think it's not just on social media, but maybe on other channels, on other outlets, you can get away with not being 100% authentic. Maybe that works in a press release. Maybe that works even on your job post. But as soon as you're using social media platforms and channels for employer branding, I think authenticity is like not just a must-have, but it's almost an enforcing factor on these platforms. And how can you be authentic? That's the big question. And I don't. Well, I have one suggestion to make. It's not an answer. Maybe it works not for everyone, and I know there's complications with that. But in my opinion, and that's also true for most of the great examples I've seen with our business, but also personally, is being authentic works best when you give your team, your employees, a voice, and actually involve them in employer branding, and that can be done by giving them the opportunity to share their experiences and their stories on your company profiles, or doing campaigns where you're actively engaging your team to contribute content, like sharing memorable moments of your onboarding when you started at the company, or uh, supporting a certain cause together, things like that. I mean, of course, I'm more like a technical person, not super creative, but this is just some examples on how you can involve your team into the employer branding campaigns. And I think if you do that right, then this can really be like really work out in an authentic way. And I think that is one of the most important strategic tips I would recommend considering.
Yeah. I was just gonna follow up on the previous question as well, because I feel like maybe because I joined them together, it's possible that you missed it. Is there any company in particular? You don't have to go in depth. I'm sure we can find this because we don't even have as much time as I would like. But
Yeah,
is there any company in particular that you feel is working their employer branding in like a really excellent way, like a company that you've noticed, maybe outside of Google, because we've sort of agreed that
of
they do
course,
a really
of
good
course.
job.
Of course. So, well, I mean, I will. I did. I do see a lot of projects and companies in our with the group of our customers. It's super hard to pick someone specific. But I do regularly look at those projects, and I saw a great campaign, and maybe that's worth picking out because sometimes you think like not every industry is like super creative and cutting edge, whatever. Of course, something like Google is cool, and maybe some other consumer products like I don't know, like Uber or whatever. They're like just hot and sexy. I saw a great campaign recently by Bearing Point. Bearing Point is a management and consulting company, so not something you would immediately consider to be very easy to communicate in an authentic way on social media. But they recently ran a campaign to engage their team, their workforce, and the campaign was called I think it was called 10 Days of Caring. And internationally, they asked their employees to share what causes they were personally supporting, like if they were donating some money for some cause, or if they were joining forces on helping someone in the community. And the campaign actually was so successful that it was extended for like 2 or 3 months. They got like a lot of content contribution from the team. They were using a hashtag, by the way, to gather all this content, which is another great tactical tip. To use a hashtag for branding purposes, for employer branding purposes, and encourage your team, your employees to use that hashtag to share stories, to share photos. The Bearing Point campaign was very, very successful in that. So they collected tons of content from their team. They made it available not just on social media, but also on their website, which is again a tip I definitely have to mention. Sorry if I'm too
No, no
if
worries.
I'm
No worries.
getting too deep here, but
No worries.
but of course, think about this Bearing Point campaign. So where they were asking their teams to share their causes with the hashtag 10 days of caring. Now that's great. All that content is on social media, which is great. We want to do employer branding on social media, but what we believe is super beneficial to bring it back to your own assets. And by bringing back, I mean it's like, let's collect all the content that the employees have been sharing, curate it maybe or moderate it, and then put it on on the Bearing Point website. You can use that, of course, to spice up your job post. For example, job post gets like much more interesting. I get all the facts. Hey, that's the job. That's what's required of me. That's the benefits. That's the salary. But now I want to know how do these people really work together. And by embedding or including authentic content from your team, from your employees, that is a great way to connect these two things. So yeah, long story short, great campaign. Kudos to Bearing Point. There is a lot of other companies doing similar stuff, of course, but this was the most recent one, which was also executed in a very well way.
Thank you, thank you, thank you for sharing that. And apologies for pressing. I just really wanted to know because I
Of
think
course,
it just always helps to have practical examples.
of
Um,
course.
so I think just
and
barring
and
along.
and And sorry for interrupting you. And if one of our listeners or viewers is interested in this campaign or other campaigns that we believe did a great job of using social media content, social media channels for employer branding, we have a great blog post. You can just go to blog.walls.io and search for employer branding. You will find it, or maybe we can share it here afterwards in the show notes.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. That's something that we can get the production team to include. So I think just with this now, we would love to see if we could take a couple questions from members of the audience. So please feel free to join and just ask a couple more things depending on what has piqued your interest, or if there's anything else that you would like to hear from Michael. Before we sort of round up, I have a couple personal questions that I like to ask as well to close off. Um, but yeah, I'm just opening the floor just in case anybody feels like they want to. And also, yeah, thank you very much for sharing the link, Michael. I've just seen it. So yeah, please feel free to check if you're in the audience and just you're willing to see the link. But yeah, like I've said, guys, if there's any additional questions that you want to ask, please do. But in the absence of them, okay, so I see one from Angelica who says, besides LinkedIn, what is the best next social network to recruit?
I love the question, and I should have tackled that topic myself. I mean, I did briefly mention LinkedIn, of course. So LinkedIn is, of course, the obvious choice, at least for all, let's say, information work jobs or white collar jobs, right? LinkedIn is probably the 800-pound gorilla. What I find super interesting is what's happening in terms of recruiting on TikTok, and personally, I just feel to be too how should I say, too old for TikTok. So I'm not really using it myself. And of course, everyone knows TikTok is funny little movies with dancing teenagers or people. But when we introduced TikTok and we added the platform last year to our product, to Walls.io, and I was pretty skeptical. I will be honest. My team, who is partly much younger than me, was really pushing. Hey, let's add TikTok support. Let's add TikTok support. I was like, does that really match our typical B2B customer? I was very
Yeah.
skeptical. And once we've launched it, I did of course look into our customers' social media walls, as we call it, and I was very happy to have learned that I was completely wrong. Actually, a lot of companies already are using TikTok, especially for employer branding and recruiting. So they're letting their interns post videos about their typical workday. They're sharing experience from when their team is going to an offsite and stuff like that. So, and especially with companies which, again, you might not immediately think that they are um, very social media savvy, like boring old school companies in the manufacturing or in industries. So stuff like that. Actually, I've seen great examples of these types of companies using TikTok very well for employer branding. So LinkedIn aside, I would definitely check out TikTok and look for company profiles and what they're doing there in employer branding.
That's a wonderful tip. That's actually a wonderful tip. And it reminds me of something that I recently saw. Actually, maybe not recently. I've seen it over time. There's a guy on TikTok, I forget his name now. I wish I could share it, but he cleans windows. He cleans windows and he does it in an extremely creative way where on a typical day you would never sit and watch someone clean windows, but he has music going, he has all sorts of tricks that he does, and now he has millions of followers. So there's so many distinct and interesting ways that I think that you can promote yourself in TikTok, and I appreciate you mentioning that as an option, because it's not something that people would typically think about, and it was definitely not something I was thinking about. So it just goes to show you the evolution of so many different facets of like the work life in 2022. Um, I guess I
Definitely.
was going to take some more questions from the audience, but in the absence of them, maybe I should just round up and then ask some of my final questions to go. So I think just kind of summing it up for the audience before I go into my final question. Creating a social environment and giving your employees the confidence and tools for online sharing can have a drastic impact on your employer brand. In today's connected business world, social media and employer branding go hand in hand, like Michael has said. You can't really separate one from the other. And it's very important that you're able to incorporate your employees as well in the process. So when an employee is proud and excited to work for a company, they can't help but share it through social media. And with the click of a button, an employee can share the good news about your company to friends, family, and even the general public. And also just kind of sharing about some of the stuff that we said. By facilitating positive social media branding, your company increases employee loyalty and retention with the attracting new pools of talent, and your employee engagement also skyrockets. So like I've said before, like, you know, with them engaging on their posts on social media, people share their good news and informations. They share about promotions. They also share things about being brand leaders. And next thing you know, your company is no longer a faceless brand. You know, it has actual people that represent it, and the public will see your brand as a collection of fun, interesting, and talented people. I hope I did a decent enough job of just kind of summing up some of the stuff that we've discussed today. But to finalize, Michael, I want to ask you a question that we ask our guests every single week. So we love to know a little more about our guests with this one question that we ask them. And that question is, what are your three favorite books that you'd love to share? Your three favorite books, rather.
Oh, thanks for that. Thanks for that question, Deji. Obviously, luckily, I was able to. You gave me a hint about that question, so I could think about it before.
Yeah.
And I will be honest, because otherwise I would have no chance here to. And I am a relatively avid reader, so it's even harder to answer that. So I picked three books, three different types of books. I love to read. I love to read business books, most obviously. And one I really like to recommend is called The Deadline. The Deadline, a novel about project management by Tom DeMarco. It's a super fun. It doesn't sound fun, I know. A novel about project management is probably the least fun book title that you can imagine, but it's actually a very nice fictional story about a fictional software team that has to that is working in a country where there's a dictator. The dictator commands them to build like 10 software products in 1 year. So totally crazy backstory, and it basically shows why software projects can go wrong in such environments. It's super fun to read, especially for nerds and people who are active in software development. Second one I picked is Biography, because I also love to read biographies, and it was hard to pick, but one of my most famous, most favorite biographies I've read is the one by Phil Knight, who's the founder of Nike. It's called
Yeah.
Shoe Dog, a memoir of the creator of Nike. So I'm not sure if you have read it, but this is an absolutely great book if you want to learn more about the history and the early days of Nike. And finally, I picked a novel, so that's not just serious books. And this is one I've read the first time when I was a teenager, and I actually read it again 2 years ago. It's The Stand by Stephen King. So it's a horror novel. And the reason I read it 2 years ago, because The Stand is about the end of the world caused by a flu epidemic. So it was kind of fitting to it was kind of fitting to read it again 2 or 3 years ago when we had to face the COVID issue. So that's the three books I would like to recommend and point out.
Nice, nice. Thank you very much. Shoe Dog is actually something that's been on my list forever. I just haven't had the time
Uh,
to actually go into it. But yeah, I've heard so much about the book. And also Stephen King. I mean, I've never really read his work because sometimes it could be very threatening for me to do horror, and I just tend to run away from it. But that sounds like an excellent premise as well, you know. So thank you very much for sharing that. And also thank you for joining us today, Michael. Like honestly, this has been enlightening and enjoyable and insightful and educative. And I think we're just very happy to have you on. And also just even just speaking to you today, I think one of the things that's kind of come across is and with that we've had with other people that we've spoken to on the platform, serendipity seems to kind of be like a theme where it just like feels like people sort of stumble on what it is that they want to do, you know, so they have these plans of like maybe, so for example, in your case, you're a software engineer, for example, but then you say that the idea came from a party, you know, so that's something that's extremely interesting to hear because it just keeps being something that's repeated, you know, everyone kind of has a plan, an idea, and then the idea just kind of hits them in the face and sets them up for the rest of their lives. So we're really grateful to have you on to share this story with us. And we hope that we'll have you on sometime again in the future.
Thanks again for having me. It was really fun, a fun conversation. And yeah, as you said, serendipity is really the key here. And I hope the in-event crowd, the in-event community enjoyed it today. Thanks for listening. And again, thanks for having me.
Thank you so much, Michael. And thank you to everyone who's joined us from today, be it on LinkedIn or YouTube or on the InEvent platform. We're grateful for you guys, and we're grateful that you joined us from all over the world. Like I always say, guys, it's been an exciting time, and we're honestly looking forward to the next one. Please join us next week because we're having another interesting episode tuned up for you guys. But in the meantime, it's been a pleasure. My name is Deji. Like always, have a wonderful day and see you soon.